Today I'll be talking to you guys about Senhor Santo Cristo dos Milagres, which translates into English as Senhor Santo Cristo of Miracles. This image is from São Miguel Azores, and the reason I chose this image specifically is because throughout my entire life it has been always present, as I come from Azorean heritage, but I never actually knew that it was a Jesus depiction. I always just thought of it as Senhor Santo Cristo and never viewed it as, oh, that's a depiction of Jesus. And since during reading week I was going to Portugal, I had a trip booked for Portugal, I thought what a time to research more about this if I'm like going specifically into the field and into the area. So I chose this image, and the one negative of choosing this image is there's very little scholarly research done and articles written, and you kind of have to sift through theological versus non-theological and more scholarly based information, which thankfully I'm able to do through taking this course and through having a theological perspective as well on this matter. So whose Jesus is this? So I'm going to take you into the historical context of the creation of this image. So the historical account begins as the bust of Senhor Santo Cristo dos Milagres was sculpted around the beginning of the 16th century in Italy. The Pope is the one who asked this to be done. And in 1520, it was offered to two young women who visited the Pope, who went there to basically ask him if they could begin their convent and begin a church in the name of the convent. And they're both from São Miguel Azores. These women were coming from São Miguel Azores to the Pope. So basically the Pope in turn grants them permission to do so and provides them a sculpture, this bust, of Senhor Santo Cristo dos Milagres. But interesting enough, when returning home from Rome to São Miguel, the ship was in an accident, everything was lost, but miraculously, one can say, and what many people on the island do say, is that the sculpture arrived into the coast of the convent where it was supposed to be found. That is true, that did happen, that is a historical account of that. But what's interesting enough is that the people, the devotees of this image, don't know about the shipwreck. They just know the image miraculously. The rhetoric behind this is that the image miraculously washed up on the coast of the convent. So it's called the Calura convent. So that's the convent right there. And where it washed up is into this cove that's back here, which is right at the foot of the convent. So many people on the island just have this rhetoric, and the story is being told of oral tradition that it showed up here, that this image miraculously from God appeared here, but in fact it was actually, like, historically a shipwreck occurred, and with luck it drifted towards the actual convent it was supposed to be in. So just to give you some background of geography here of where this is, so you see here, this is Europe, we see Italy's here, so that's where Rome would be. Portugal's here, and then the Azores are these little speckles there. So blowing Azores up here, you see there's 9 islands in the Azores. The island we're focusing on is the island of São Miguel, which is right here. Specifically, the two important regions are the two cities in São Miguel, which is Ribeira Grande and Ponta Delgada, which is the capital. And we'll see those two geographic regions play an important part in the story of this image of Jesus. So, Jesus Christ was kept at that Calura convent where it washed up for 20 years. And then it was moved in 1541 to a newly built convent of Our Lady of Hope in Ponta Delgada. Then in 1681, a young woman from Ribeira Grande named Teresa da Anunciada arrived at the convent, and the nuns gave her the job to take care of the deteriorating image, which is understandable. It was deteriorating at the time because over the amount of time that passed and being so close to salt water, it would deteriorate in that manner. So lots of work had to be done. So it was a big process of restoration that was placed in the hands of Teresa da Anunciada, and in order to do so, she knew she needed money, she knew she needed support, so she wrote an autobiography of her story alongside Santo Cristo and the historical account of that. And she wrote, using that story, she sent that story out. She also wrote specifically to kings of Portugal and counts of Ribeirão Grande, the city she's from. So all of her effort led to multiple donations occurring and her accruing multiple donations. Some of those donations included precious jewelry, which is the main aspect of embellishment on the figure. So that includes a scepter was sent, a robe, which is called a capa, and we'll look more into that further in the presentation, a crown, a halo, and a chest medallion. And money, again, monetary donations were given to her as well. But the jewelry, the precious jewelry that was sent, interestingly enough, are all symbols of divine royalty and are symbols of ecce homo. We'll go into more. So this image here I took in the convent, and this is just on the floor place. It's very big. The image does make it look big. But this is, here you see Teresa de Anunciada as you saw in Cristo here. And this is the depiction of her worshipping the image, but at the same time showing it in the dark and how it had to be kept in the dark because it was deteriorating. And this is the connection between when she knew she needed to start helping this image flourish and gain popularity. Okay, so the icon devotion is multifaceted for Santo Cristo. This continues from Teresa de Anunciada. Her principles and ideologies towards spreading this image across the island. And we still see these devotional little pieces today. So there's photos of the bus, rosaries, medallions, these things called medidas, which are translated into English as measurements. Basically, it's a piece of ribbon that is the exact height and measurement of the image of Santo Cristo. I was not able to get my hands on one of those, even though it's very interesting and I'd love to get my hands on one of those. There are prayer books. There's an anthem for this image, which the multiple marching bands across the island know how to play. It's very important within procession, for the processions of this image. And I will play this anthem just a couple slides down. They're tiles that people fix to the exterior of their houses. And I have one here. So in Canada, it's really hard to affix these to the outside of your houses because of our bricks we have. But in Portugal, every kind of house has one. It's literally just like a floor tile painted on top with the image. This one has some wording on it, just asking for prayers and protection. But these are affixed to many houses outside, which is very interesting. To have that connection there, to provide like an identity with that and your house and the family. Next, there's a procession, which I mentioned, which the anthem, many bands play the anthem. And the first procession actually took place in the end of the 17th century. And at that time, the busk would leave the church and just be a procession would occur to each church on the island, and there are many of them. And that's all that would happen. It's important to note that the busk, within its entire history, the image of Santo Cristo, has never entered people's houses. It just leaves church and enters church. But we'll see that the capa, that the cloak he wears, that is different. That does enter people's houses and enters hospitals. And we'll look further into that after. So there's just some pictures. These are actual things I brought back with me. So this devotional medallion, here you have, it's very small, it's about the size of a quarter. You have the image of Santo Cristo there, and on this side it says Esperança, which is hope, which refers back to the Church of Hope, the Convent of Hope. Church is being renamed to the Church of Santo Cristo, but initially it was the Church of Hope. Punta Delgada, which is the city, and Azores area, and Ecce Homo in the middle, referring back to that Passion of Christ. So what I found interesting, which I only noticed when I got back and was taking these pictures, was that there's a presence of Teresa de Anunciada here in the devotional object. So we see here on this rosary, Santo Cristo is on the one side, and then on the other side is Sister Teresa de Anunciada, which I found very interesting, because you see that an image of Jesus with a woman at the same time, which just goes back similarly to the depiction of Jesus with Mary Magdalene, and you go to that, a woman who takes care of this Jesus. Other devotional items, there's a small rosary here and a keychain, which on this side has the base of the image, and then on the next side has the picture of the church, all lit up and decorated for the festivities of Senhor, Santo, Cristo. Okay, so another important aspect here is the way people are able to access the statue. So in 2013, I visited a church, and I noticed that I found it very interesting, and I found it weird that you had to, in order to see the statue, it had to be through this lattice work. So you never got a full, you had to look through these holes between the lattice to kind of see the image, to pray to the image, which was very strange to me, even in 2013, before doing any academic study. But when I went this year, I was really hoping I would see that again, but it was more interesting to see that because the church is under construction, actually, you are able to walk into this part, which is, you see here, this is the image, and that's the image there in that small little dot. And the image here, to get access into this room, you can only be a nun. So previously here, only the nuns could be back there. But this year when I went, you're actually able to walk up and pray here. So you see how there's such a difference now between how connected one can be with the image versus before there was no connection. It was a harder connection, a farther connection. You need a much stronger faith to be connected versus here you see a very close aspect here. You get that very close familial feeling towards it. Okay, so now I'll play for you the anthem of Senhor, Santo, Cristo, Milagres, just so you get a sense of a way that people actually are devout to this image. So I'll just play for you the sound. And this is actually performed by the military band in the Azores, so you see a connection between politics here, the military, and faith in a way, which is interesting as well to touch upon. Translated, doing direct translation doesn't work as well for this, but basically it's just praising him and all of his miracles he does, and its connection to the passion as well within this, just saying from resurrection, you're able to help us through sin, and all that. So I think that's enough of that. Let's move on next. So let's answer that question, Jesus who? So exactly some direct information on the statue itself. So Senhor, Santo, Cristo dos Milagres, as we know, as hopefully you can see now, is a direct, distinctive feature of Azorean Catholicism. So people's devotion to this passion image of Christ derives from missionary work of the Franciscans. So through the passion, basically, Senhor, Santo, Cristo is seen to lead mankind to resurrection and to the triumph of life. Which you can see through that anthem of Senhor, Santo, Cristo. That's kind of the message that's being portrayed. It's a bonding homage to the Ecce Homo. So basically taken from Lalanda reading, Teresa de Annunciada lived a faith that was centered in Ecce Homo. She believed that referencing Ecce Homo in a situation of non-power, in which he is in total communion with mankind, people would feel closer to their God. So that's kind of this Jesus depiction. But ultimately, this Jesus image portrays a healer, a miracle worker, and a protector. So the image of Senhor Cristo has many different, as we know, jewelry to it. That goes back to Teresa de Annunciada when she asked the kings and counts to send her donations. The main parts of this there's three aspects. So there's radiance, the scepter, and the crown of thorns. So radiance has to do with all the jewels that are encrusted within the halo, the chest piece, everything, the capa, which is the cape. that's all radiance. So it's all the jewels that it's adorned with, creates a radiance, creates this aspect of supreme. The scepter, which is this piece here, it represents a stick, the stick that the Roman guards used on Jesus when they took him to the court. So having that direct relation to the passion and connection to the passion story. And then last is the crown of thorns, which is the crown of thorns that was on Jesus' head that the people put on him. What I found important, which I want everybody to kind of take from this, is that all aspects of Christ's passion that would be very gruesome, like we saw in Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ film, here there is blood, like you do see blood existing, but it's covered with these jewels. So the blood on the forehead is covered with the crown of thorns, but the crown of thorns is encrusted with jewels. So you're kind of, the actual human Jesus, that blood that shows that he's human, is being covered with all these jewels and depictions. The kappa covers all of the injuries underneath from crucifixion. So it shows us very divine, supreme Jesus, and it removes the aspect of Jesus. It removes like the human aspect of Jesus. So it shows Jesus here as like a king, that king aspect of Jesus. And we can see this direct relation between the passion, because within that little room that I had access to this time, on the wall is tiled with artwork of the different stations of the cross, so the different scenes of the passion. So you see here at the end is the crucifixion, and that follows the crucifixion is on this side here, that would be here, I don't have an image of unfortunately, is the image of Santo Cristo. So what for and why? Why does this Jesus exist? So specifically it's the kappa. So this image continues to exist because of the kappa, so that cloak it uses. So there's two types of kappas. The first one is the offered kappa, the two uses of it. The first one's an offered one. Basically, the offered kappa began in 1702 when the Fray Francisco de Chagas offered a cloak, so a kappa, to Senhor Santo Cristo to thank him for protection during a Moorish pirate attack. So he, basically the story goes, he prayed to the image, this Jesus, asking for protection during the attack. He received it, he was safe, so he in turn donated a kappa, and these have always in time been encrusted with jewels. They are very expensive to donate, so it's really showing this faith that's attributed. Today, so this continues, and today people are making promesas, which are like promises and prayers to Senhor Santo Cristo dos Milagres, and then when their prayers are answered, or if they really want their prayer answered, they will donate a kappa. So this, interesting fact here, when I was interviewing the volunteer at the convent, Mrs. Ferreira, she had told me that one of the most expensive kappas that were ever donated cost 25 million euros, and it was donated by a political figure, which is very interesting. She couldn't tell me the name of the political figure, but it's very interesting to see again a connection between faith and state, like church and state here. The second kappa is a kappa I researched about by an article of Helio Suarez, and he writes an extensive article on this, basically of the therapeutic use of the kappa. So the kappas are lent to people with incurable diseases. This has been going on for years. Unfortunately, there's not an actual date I can get back to. But there has been cures of cancer and cardiovascular disease linked to this use of this kappa by sick people. The church has investigated these claims to make sure that there was no scientific medical intervention added, so that it wasn't actually the kappa, it was the medicine. But in fact, they had stated that there was no intervention, and it was in fact attributed to the using of the kappa. So today there are 25 kappas specifically that are only used to lend out to the sick, 9 of which have never been returned. Mrs. Ferreira let me know that they don't know if it's because people haven't been cured yet, that's why they haven't returned them back, and they're just waiting, or if people have stolen them, because yes, in fact, they are very expensive, and even though the 25 that they use to lend out are the cheaper ones, they still have jewels on them, they still have diamonds on them, so people will steal them, unfortunately, to get money. Another thing is there is one white kappa, which is lent out to sick children. So all the other kappas are red with gold, and there's only one that's completely white, encrusted with diamonds, that's left to lend out to the sick children. And although Senhor Cristo himself, the statue, cannot attend, goes from church to church and will not go farther, won't enter lay people's homes, won't even leave the country, these kappas provide that, and they leave. They go to the United States, they go to Canada, they are given to churches across the North America, and they're used to comfort the ill and those in need here in Canada as well, and in the United States. So it's interesting to see, and ultimately I can attribute that. I think that this kappa is ultimately an aniconic image of Jesus, almost similar to in Buddhism, how an umbrella, a parasol, is an aniconic image of the Buddha. This kappa here can be attributed to an aniconic image of Senhor, Santo, Cristo dos Milagres, because this is what people attribute to curing. Although yes, this is attributed to the Senhor, Santo, Cristo, but this is what creates the curing, which is very interesting. And I can go on forever talking about that. But ultimately, that's the image of Jesus Christ I chose, the image of Jesus. And prior to this, it was a complete stranger. I was aware of the image, but did know nothing about it. And there is so much more work to be done, and I wish I could go do more work on this, but unfortunately, my study is done. But it's a really good field to talk about, and I hope more study goes into this. But yeah, thank you for watching my presentation. If you have any questions, let me know.